Your problem is there are so many pens out there. As a handlettering beginner, how can you possibly choose which one is going to work for you? And there are some pens that actually make handlettering harder. The good news for you is that I've tried hundreds of pens over the years. That's probably not the best news to my wallet. Regardless, some pens are great, some are not so great. Let's talk about 5 types of brush pens you should get as a handlettering beginner so you don't have to try the hundreds of pens. Don't waste your money on pens that are no good. Get the pens that are good from the start. Pens that are going to help you feel good about your lettering right now. If you're new here, I'm Sarah from Ensign Insights, and I have a lot of favorite pens. My 3 favorite brush pens for beginners are Pentel Touch, Kuretake Furubiori, and Crayola markers. These are great brush pens to start with. You could get just those and go on your happy way. If you're still here, it means that's not enough for you. Welcome to the pen addiction. You can stop anytime, right? Yeah, me too. I wanted to organize pens in a more universal way to be the most helpful for you instead of just saying, these are my 20 favorite pens. That doesn't help you if they're too expensive for your current budget or don't fit with your style, or if you can't find them in the part of the world where you live. I don't think there is one universally perfect pen, but instead there are universal types of pens. Here are those 5 types of pens that every handlettering beginner should have. And just so you know, I saved the best for last, and I'm going to give you a little spoiler and tell you that the last ones are pens that don't fray, so you'll want to stick around for that. The first type of brush pen that every beginner should have are small brush pens. Why small? They're easier to control than large brush pens. You get a feel for how to work with the flexible tip and how to give it heavy or light pressure. The first ones you see here are my Monami Plus Pen 3000. You might like these if you like a really firm tip. They are firm, so you can get monoline lettering with them. So these are good for you if you like pressing really hard as you're lettering. I personally love these. They're really cheap and they have a lot of colors. The next 2 are Tombow Furunosuke and Pentel Touch brush pens. They're really similar and they are both really popular. Tombow has a hard tip and a soft tip. If you get the pack of each of these, that can help you decide which one you like best because it's totally a personal preference. Tombow has different colors in the hard tip. If you like the soft tip, Pentel is also the soft tip, and Pentel comes in lots of colors. If you have no idea where to start, get a set of Pentel for small brush pens. I recommend starting with that first, and lots of people have been very happy with that. Next are Marvila Pen Flex. These ones have a really nice brush tip, and I recommend them to anyone who is ready to try a new small brush pen. The only problem for me is that the colors are deeper, more natural tones, which you may love. I personally love bright rainbow colors, and that's why I don't use these as often as other pens, even though these are really, really nice. Next is Zebra Funwari. These ones kind of feel like they're in between the hard and soft tip. They're pretty similar. I haven't found these ones to be as easy to find as Pentel or Tombow, but they do have some unique colors. These are not all of the small brush pens out there. These are my favorite ones or ones that I hear about the most, but I have so many other random small brush pens that didn't make it on this list, but these would work too. You're going to find what works best for you. You definitely want at least one small brush pen in your collection, so get one that's available where you live. And small brush pens are pretty good quality, so they don't fray as soon as other larger brush pens. If you're already feeling overwhelmed, you can download this brush pen guide to reference and see where to buy each pen. The details for that are in the description. The next type of brush pen every handlettering beginner should have are medium brush pens. Why medium? They're easier to control than large brush pens, and they have a different kind of bounce than small brush pens. You can start to do some larger lettering, but kind of ease yourself into it. The first one I love is Kuretake Furubiori. It has a really nice bounce and it's easy to find on Amazon for a good price. I like to get individual colors from jet pens. These brush pens are great to start with. Next is Stabilo .88 brush pens. These were a more recent find for me, but the tip is amazing. It's easy to control and has a good flexibility. It was a little more expensive for me in the US, but I've heard from letters in other countries that these are a great price. So that's really awesome. Next is Faber-Castell. They are so nice, really good quality. The tip has a really unique bounce and they're also water resistant, so they're a little more expensive, but if that's what you're looking for, they are worth the cost. They're a little easier to find. I got some individual colors from my local art store. I know they have them at Blick, and I've seen some sets at Michael's and Hobby Lobby. Next is Edding brush pens. They are so nice. The bounce definitely helps you to get a good transition between thick and thin strokes. They weren't the cheapest from Amazon, but once again, I've heard these are cheaper in certain countries. Next is Caran d'Ache Fibralo. They're so smooth, and wow, I love this tip so much. It just feels so good to letter with, like the rest of these medium brush pens. I think these are all so good. The full color set wasn't cheap, so I just got black and pink individually. Next is the Sakura Koi coloring brush pen. I'm mentioning these in case you like a softer tip. These feel similar to the Kuretake Furubiori, but they're a little bit softer. I personally prefer a hard tip, but I know some people like these better for the soft tip, so just keep that in mind when you're deciding. You definitely need a medium brush pen in your collection because it's going to make you feel like you know what you're doing since the pen is working with you, not making it harder for you. And honestly, you could get any of these medium brush pens and be happy. You don't need all of them, just choose the one that's easiest to find for you. Have you tried any of these medium brush pens? Which is your favorite? The third type of brush pens is large brush pens. If you love large lettering, you may want more of these. They can be a little harder to control, but they definitely give a different look to your lettering than small brush pens can get. In my opinion, you don't need large and medium, probably just the one that feels good to you. So let me explain how it feels good. Brush pens should bounce back into place, which helps you get better upstrokes because it's working with you and bouncing back against the paper instead of flopping around like a fish. Your brush pen can actually do most of the work. As you use a brush pen, it should feel good. It may be hard to know how that feels as a beginner because it all might be kind of hard at first. But I promise you, even as a beginner, if you compared a floppy fish brush pen and a nice bouncy brush pen, you will be able to feel the difference. And I've heard from so many people who told me that they thought they couldn't letter because they struggled getting thin upstrokes, and when they tried a better pen, it solved it for them. All of the pens you see in this video are ones that will help you feel good about your lettering instead of making it harder for you. The first large brush pen is Caran markers. Of all the large brush pens, I would say these are one of the easiest to control because they have a firm tip. They are more expensive though, so I understand that's not going to work for everyone. In my opinion, these are worth the cost. If you're ready to spend a little bit more, get these. I haven't heard anyone who has regretted their purchase. The tip is great quality, so it won't fray as soon as others. I also use them as watercolor, so that's another way to justify the cost. You wouldn't have to buy watercolor as well. Next is Marvy Color and brush pens. If you love a really chunky look with really thick downstrokes and thin upstrokes, these are probably the easiest to get that look. The way the nib is so flexible in just the right place makes them great for this style. I have all of the colors because I really like these ones. Next is Zebra Mild Liner brush pens. I love these ones so much. The tip looks like it's a similar size to Tombow Dual brush pens, but they feel bouncier to me. They also have a fine tip, which is great. I love the colors as well. I think these would be a great large brush pen to start with. Next is Ecoline brush pens. These ones are really soft. They're actually watercolor, so they're really juicy. If you love soft brush pens, these are the best large brush pens for you. They're a little more expensive, but they are good quality. I only have a few colors since I don't love soft brush pens as much. That is my personal preference. Then we have the Winsor & Newton watercolor markers. They're not the brush markers. Those ones are different and those don't work well for lettering. So these are the watercolor markers. These ones are really smooth and bouncy, not as firm as Caran markers, but definitely not soft. They also have a fine tip, which is nice. They are a lot more expensive, but their ink and brush tip quality is really good. But because of the cost, I maybe wouldn't say these should be the first brush pens you get. I just have a few individual colors that I got from Blick. Next are Tombow Dual brush pens. I think these ones are one of the most popular, which means they're easy to find. So that's definitely a bonus about these. They have the bullet tip as well, which I always love. They're a little soft and not really bouncy, so they take a little more control. They come in lots of colors, and I know some people love having the whole set of over 100 colors. I personally just have a few colors here and there, and that's enough for me. If you try Tombow dual brush pens to start and you notice that you're struggling with them, try another kind of brush pen just to see the difference. Next are Sharpie stained brush pens. These have the best bounce. They're not advertised as brush pens, but they're really good. They are the kind of brush pen that actually helps you get thin upstrokes because it's bouncing back on the paper. They are water resistant because they're fabric markers, and the colors are really neon, which isn't my style, so I only use the pink and the black. Next are Kuretake Zig brushables. These also have a really nice bounce and they help you get good lettering. They're also water resistant. I think they may be easier to find in some places, but they've been really hard to find for me in the US lately. They used to be in Hobby Lobby, which is where I got them, but they're not there anymore. Even though I think the brush tip works for everyone, it's hard to recommend them since I don't have a reliable place to find them. But maybe they're easier for you to find where you live. Along that note, these next ones are Camlin brush pens. They are from India and I found them on Amazon for way more expensive than they are in India. I wouldn't say someone in the US needs to get these, but if you live in India, these are great. They're better than a lot of other cheap brush pens that I've tried. They're really soft though, and not everyone likes soft brush pens. They're probably most similar to Ecoline brush pens of all these other large brush pens to compare them to. This just goes to show that it really depends on where you live. Have you struggled with large brush pens in the past? Do you have a favorite? The fourth type of pen every handlettering beginner should have is a bullet or fine tip pen. I think everyone should have a bullet tip pen. You can have a fine tip too, but I personally think a bullet tip is easier to letter with for faux calligraphy. A bullet tip is just a little bit bigger, which means it's a little more forgiving for faux calligraphy, and you don't have to spend as long coloring in the downstrokes. I also think a bullet tip is a nice size for monoline lettering that goes really nicely with your brush pen lettering. If you really like smaller lettering, maybe you'd prefer a fine tip. Just find what size works for you. I like my Tombow twin tone pens because they have a bullet tip and a fine tip. You can also use the bullet tip of the Tombow dual brush pens or Zebra mild liner brush pens. These are definitely great options because then you have one pen with two types. And that's great to only have to buy one pen to start. Next is the Stabilo .88. These are a nice bullet tip. Stabilo also has the fine tip if you would prefer that. Another pen similar to Tombow Twin Tone are these Monami Live Color pens. And you don't need both. They're pretty similar, a little bit different here and there. But honestly, just whichever one is easier for you to get. Or maybe you'd prefer a totally different bullet tip pen, and that works too. In my desk setup, I have black, white, and gold pens right next to where I letter because I tend to reach for those most often. I have so many because I haven't narrowed it down yet, and I'm still trying to decide which ones are most essential. I will say for a white gel pen, I love my Uniball Signo, and my favorite gold pen is the Uniball as well. I use these for any white or gold details in my lettering pieces, and for a larger gold pen, I love my Marvy Decocolor. You may have also heard of Jelly Roll gel pens. I love these ones and they have a variety of options. I really like my black one. It's super smooth. The reason you might want to get gel pens over other fine tip pens is because they are opaque, so you can add details to your lettering. I mostly add gold or white to colorful lettering. Before we move on to number 5, here is a quick side note. Maybe these are honorable mentions. Watercolor brush pens. I wouldn't say everyone needs them, more if you want to get into watercolor lettering or if you like lettering with a real brush with bristles like a paintbrush. That can be harder to control because the individual bristles will not want to be controlled and will do their own thing. I really like the brushy look it gives, which you can't really get with brush pens. There are several different brands and a lot of off brands that make these. I used to have a few different ones, but now I just have my Color It watercolor brush pens and my Kuretake Zig Clean Color Real Brush. Once again, I wouldn't say beginners need to have them, but I get a lot of questions about these, so I think they're important to know. One plus side is that since they have the individual bristles, they won't fray. And that brings me to the last type of pen every beginner should have. Number 5, pens that don't fray. I think it's pretty obvious why you might want these. There's no worry that you are going to ruin these. You won't. You can practice heavy and light pressure without worrying about figuring out how to get a really thin upstroke. They're also cheap and you can use them on any paper. That's why these are great for beginners to start with. The ones I started with are Crayola Broadline. There are also Crayola Super Tips. It's a personal preference if you are going to like one or the other. Super Tips are just smaller. I'll also say that there are a lot of markers that are like Crayola if you don't have easy access to Crayola, like my Mala markers from IKEA. If you don't live in the US, you probably have some form of this marker. Basically, it's a kid's marker. They have this squishy tip that can be flexible when given more pressure. So even though they're not actually called brush pens, they get the job done, and they do it really well. Currently, my favorite markers like this are the Staedtler Tri-Plus highlighters. They are more rounded, and I feel like I have really good control with them. I also like the pastel colors. These were surprising. I didn't know you could get any pressure with them. So maybe look around at what markers you already have and try giving them a little pressure to see if they can do this too. After seeing all of these pens, just remember the best brush pen to start with is the pen that you have. You definitely don't need all of them. Choose one from each section or just choose one to start. So you just saw all these pens that I love, and maybe you're still feeling a little bit overwhelmed. I know it's a lot of pens. So I have made a guide for you, this brush pen guide. It's totally free in my Insider Scoop library. So that's when you sign up for my email newsletter, you get access to everything that's in the Insider Scoop library. I will leave the details for that below. If you want to start learning lettering with me here on YouTube, I hope you'll subscribe so we can do this together. I created this playlist right here with the most simple steps to get started in lettering right now. I'll see you in that playlist.